Hey, my last talk, I'm going to talk about Islamization and radicalization. Um, we'll start off with Roy. Roy's central argument is there is an Islamization of radicalism, or Islamization of radicalization, as opposed to radicalization of Islam. He means that the jihadists are radical before finding Islam as a way and a means to express their frustrations. Um, he did this by studying a group of jihadists. He notes particularly that they don't need to be devout followers of Islam, like a stereotypical image of a jihadi depicts. For example, he says that often in their life leading up to the attack, they often drink and chase women, and they don't pray 5 times a day. Often after this, radicalization happens shortly before the attack. So it's not like a lifelong devotion. And he gives the example of the Paris attackers who ran the bar. And then he says, often jihadists engage in acts of petty crime and then lead to a stint in jail. And the radicalization doesn't happen in the mosques like everyone would think, stereotypically, but it happens in the prisons, where they meet sort of self-proclaimed imams and fake imams that know the way. But when it comes to the proper mainstream true mosques, they're often outcasts. And the common denominator is that all the attacks end in death. So there's always this. Roy says that there's this fascination with death being the final result, with this sort of nihilistic belief that everything is just pointless and they should just end in death. But they want to do it in such a fantastic way. And he sort of links this. I think he mentions at one point, he sort of compares this to the American school shooters, where they have this sort of social outcast sort of identity, and they want to go out with a bang. But the point is they want to go out. And so he sort of links this. He also links this nihilism with like millennial youth culture, which I think is a pretty general statement. I don't think every millennial is a nihilist. Thanks. And he sort of compares this to the Maoists and the Mexican drug gangs as well. A similar sort of dynamic. They use these symbols of anarchy, of like violence and death, and like sort of all their weapons, and that's what they love when they go to Syria and they post pictures of them holding big Kalashnikovs, AK-47s, and he says, that makes them look so attractive to all the women and things. Just like every nihilist millennial wants. So he argues that this happens through a process of deculturation, a process where second-generation immigrants are left without an identity, either in the country of their parents' origin or in the country they grew up in, leaving a vacuum for jihadists to fall into. Roy describes how the pull of this romanticized life of ISIS transformed these losers from suburbs into online heroes and allows them to live out these nihilist dreams. And they differ from previous generations because they don't care. They're not particularly concerned with the anti-colonial struggle, and he points out that I think he says all of them don't have any connection to a pro-Palestine cause body or NGO or something like this. So he says it's completely anti. I think he rejects the idea that it's motivated by colonial factors, which I think another common denominator is most of these countries have been impacted by the effects of colonialism. So I think that's also a bit of a generalization, to be honest. Alternatively, we have Capel, who argues that the recent attacks are due to the 3G or the third gen, this new, cool, hip jihadi. The first generation was after Afghanistan, who opposed sort of any Western or pro-Western or pro-Russian government or nation. The second generation was Al-Qaeda. And this third generation is different because it has more of a bottom-up approach instead of sort of the instructions and the mantra and the doctrine coming from the big guys in suits in the offices in Al-Qaeda block. They can come from more small-scale things, and this was more small-scale players, and this was encouraged by the guidebook to help these homegrown terrorists, which was called the Global Islamic Republic, the Global Islamic Resistance Call, released in 2005 by Al-Shuri. And this was helped by the rise of the internet, which makes everyone a lot more connected, and so it's easier to find your jihadi rhetoric. And then, of course, the Arab Spring was the other sort of catalyst, causing the state failure. Allowing a breeding ground of everyone just to go and train and arm themselves and mix with other like-minded nihilists. And then also, but Capel focuses more on the situation in France. This is sort of the focus, a lot of the focus on his book, saying that the poor economic conditions recently, which is making sort of lower skilled jobs a lot more vulnerable economically, so there's a lot more unemployment, and also this is disproportionately affecting young Muslim males who, even if they get the proper education, they are excluded from the system. And then this, combined with the right-wing populist narrative of this very sectarian, very anti-immigration rhetoric, is causing sort of this unemployment at the same time with Islamophobia. And so this causes like a perfect melting pot of chaos for the vulnerable young Muslim unemployed men to fall into. But I think, to be honest, you have to mix the two. There's definitely a socio-economic problem with it. But I'm not sure you can just blame it on just youth culture. I think that's quite simplistic. There are many, especially youth culture, of millennial youth culture. There's all kinds of youth culture. There's always been sort of rebellious in nature, and it hasn't led to a massive terrorist attacks. So yeah, I think you have to combine the two. But thanks for listening. Goodbye.